Hi, this is Andrew. Thanks for joining me. Today's video is about Firewalld or a firewall on CentOS. So we will be using Firewalld. That's the default firewall for CentOS. In prior videos, we've really kind of avoided it. I've said eventually we get to it. Eventually we'll get to it, and now it's time to get to it, to actually control access to the server using a firewall. So first thing I'm going to do is systemctl, and I want to run status firewalld, and you see it doesn't even find the service because it's not installed. So first thing we need to do is install it. Yum install firewalld. It's going to be a pretty quick install. I will select yes, of course. And now the service is installed. Now I can repeat that status, and it's going to say it's not running because we didn't actually start the service yet. So let's go back to systemctl, change the status to a start, and while we're at it, we're going to enable it so that it runs each time. Now, from here we can actually start running commands. Well, if we look at status now, we see it's running. So we can actually start running commands to look at what the firewall is doing. Okay, first thing I want to do is actually see if it did anything. So I have a Windows 10 system here, and I previously went to the website that this redirects to that Linux server. So I'm going to type it in again, CentOS andrew.local, and I successfully got there, but this time it's actually spinning. It's not getting there. And that's because the firewall is configured to block HTTP by default. So let's change that. Let's, before we get into everything the firewall can do, we're going to just run a command to open up a port on the firewall. So now the web page finally, the connection timed out. Let's go back to the Linux server and add a command, or run a command to add a rule to the firewall that will allow the HTTP website to get through. So cleared everything out of the way, and it is firewall -cmd -zone equals public add service equals HTTP. And that was successful. Now if I refresh, we're probably going to run into another issue because it's actually going to try to forward to HTTPS. So let's add HTTPS. Now let's see if we can get to the website. Now that I've opened up the firewall. Let's close it and reopen it. And we have, now, CentOS.andrew.local, and now we get there. So just by allowing these services, we're able to get in. So what we did is we ran the command, firewall command. We said we want to do it on zone public, and then we added the service HTTP and HTTPS, and that allowed everything through. Now there's more to it than that. So let's start looking at the details of everything that's configured in the firewall. So first thing, we said zone public. What does that mean? Well, there are multiple zones, and we can set each interface to be in a specific zone. But if we run firewall cmd and --get default zone -zone, it tells us we are in the public zone. So that's the zone that we added this rule to. If I added it to a different zone, it would have allowed the HTTP, HTTPS through in a different zone, but that's not the zone we're configured on. So now that we saw we were in the default zone, let's see what the default zone is, how the default zone is set up. So we can go firewall cmd, and we're going to list all. And what does list all tell us? list all says these are all of the configurations in the default zone. So we are under services. DHCP v6 client is allowed, HTTP, HTTPS, which I just added, and SSH. And SSH is really important because that's how I'm connecting to the server. If I removed it and tried to reconnect, it would block my connection and then I wouldn't be able to do anything there. So if we want to see all of the zones that are available, we can run firewall cmd and get zones. And these are all of the zones that are available in this configuration. And we were looking at public before, so there's public. We have other zones. If we want to find out more information about it, we can do. We can look at any of these zones and say, what happens if I change the zone to zone equals. Let's look at work. List all. And these are the settings for the work zone. So if I moved the interface over to the work zone, then I would be able to get in an HTTP or SSH and DHCP, but not on HTTP because I added those to the public zone. So I could add them to the work zone right now. Obviously, that wouldn't change much if I wanted to list all on the home zone instead. That shows that there are a few extra things. Samba is in there. So let's clear things out. Now let's say I wanted to switch my interface to a we'll say the work zone. We saw SSH was there, so that's safe. So if I run firewall cmd and let's do zone equals home and -- change interface, and I'm going to change it to ETH0. Now success. Now if I go back here, HTTP wasn't listed on that, so I'm going to, well, just so it's more visible, I'll close, I'll reopen it, and you can see that when I go there, once again it starts timing out. If I wanted to add a rule to allow, I can type the same firewall -cmd -- zone equals, no, I switched to home, I guess, -- add service equals HTTP. And then I'll do it with HTTPS, go back to the website, and once again I can get through because I have added these rules to the zone that I'm currently in. So let's change back to the public zone because that's where zone equals -- zone equals public -- change interface equals Ethernet 0. So now I'm back on the public zone for my Ethernet 0 interface. So I've added HTTP a couple of times, HTTP, HTTPS. What services can we add? Well, if we run firewall -cmd and get services, we will see these are all of the services that are available that we could add right now. And each of them is associated with a port or some configuration. And if we go through the list alphabetically, we will see we have HTTP and HTTPS right there. We have other services and we can add or block any of those if we want. But Those are kind of the obvious ones, the interesting ones. Certainly if we were using bind, we'd have DNS. We would want to allow through. But here's the full list, Sambo we used previously. So this is the list that is there by default. We can actually go into a configuration file and add additional, if we had a new service we were creating. I want the Andrew service to do a certain thing and listen on a certain port. I can go in and create that and allow that through the firewall by a service name. For the next thing I want to do, I want to actually list all the services. So let's take a look at what services we have again. And we've seen this before. I just want to see it again so we can see what happens. So zone equals public and list dash services. And these are the services. You see I added DHCP, or DHCP v6 client was there, HTTP, HTTPS, SSH. And we've seen this list in different formats, but I just wanted to list the services really quick. Now, if I run systemctl restart firewalld, this is the same as this is restarting the service. If I restarted the computer, this would happen. So I just restarted the service. Now if I repeat that command to list all of my services, HTTP and HTTPS are gone now. Those entries were there, they're no longer here. I go back to this website, I refresh, and it's just going to keep spinning in timeout. That's because the firewall entries, when you put them in, they are put in as in basically a running configuration, very similar to Cisco's running configuration. If we want them to be permanent entries or to be saved to startup configuration, we can do a command, we'll look at it later, to copy over what's running into the from the what's in there to the saved configuration. But we can also use another command, permanent. So let's run firewall cmd zone equals public, and we want to add service equals HTTP, but we're going to do one more thing. We're going to do dash dash permanent and success, and then I'm going to go back and do the same thing with HTTPS. So I just made these entries permanent. But odd thing, if I go here and restart or reload the page, it's still not getting there because permanent is not running. So I could obviously run these commands again without the permanent, and that would make them run right now, or I can run that systemctl restart firewall. Actually, before we do that, if we list services, we see HTTP isn't there anymore, or still isn't there. And if I go back to the restart the service, and now I run that, the list services, HTTP and HTTPS are there, and as you saw in the background, the web page loaded. So what happened is I had those in the permanent configuration, but not in the running configuration. So frequently when you see directions on a web page saying install LAMP or install Apache, and then you want to add the services to the firewall, it will list out add service HTTP, add service HTTPS dash dash permanent. So you're adding to both places at the same time. So let's say we didn't want to run the permanent command, or we made some changes to experiment. We added a few services, a few ports, which we'll get to in a little bit. And we said, okay, everything's working right now, and we want to save our configuration. There is a command that will do that. First thing I want to do, let's kind of back out of everything I did. So I'm going to run the same command. Actually, I'm going to go back this way and do it. Instead of add service HTTPS to permanent, I'm going to remove service HTTPS Success. And I'll do the same. I will remove HTTP from permanent. And if I run the list services again, it's still showing there because it's still in the runtime configuration. But I'm going to systemctl restart firewalld, and when I list services again, I'm back down to DHCP, v6, and SSH. So I'm going to clear my screen here, and now let's take a look. We're not allowing HTTP through, and let's say we wanted to experiment. We wanted to see, is this going to work for us? So we're going to run the firewall CMD, and since I'm in the public zone already, I don't need to define zone equals public. I can just say add service equals HTTP and HTTPS. So now if I list my services, I get them. Now, the situation here is it's only in the runtime configuration. It's not in the permanent configuration. So if I try this out or I make a change and something doesn't work the way I want, I can just restart the services to revert to where it was. But if I'm happy with what it is right now, I don't need to go back and repeat these commands with permanent. I can actually just run the firewall CMD and runtime -2 permanent. And this is very much like the Cisco's copy run start command. So now if I systemct, let's list our services. Now I'll do systemctl restart firewalld, and then list the services again, and after restarting it's there because I did save it to the permanent configuration. So that's a big part of what we do. One more thing I want to cover, and let's clear things and take a look. Let's say I want to add another port that doesn't have its own service. I want to add port 8080 because I have another website that is listening on 8080. So I can run firewall CMD, and I'm going to run the command add port. And because I don't know anything about this, it doesn't know anything about the service, I'm going to do 8080 and I'm going to do /TCP. And there's a success. Now, of course, this is also in the runtime configuration, not in the permanent configuration. So if I go to the firewall CMD command and I'm going to do list services, it will show me my services, but if I list ports, it shows me my ports there. And if I go back to the other command we used earlier, I can list all. And now I have both the services listed here as DHCP, HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH, but I also have ports 8080 TCP. So there's a way of adding either ports or services. I can remove ports or services, and I can decide what I want to allow through, what I want to block. If I went to Apache and changed it so it listened on the on port 8080, I would be able to get there just by going here and :8080. Obviously, it's not actually listening on that port right now, so the service is not, but the web server or the firewall is allowing that port through. So I would be able to get through to that port 8080. So that's the basics of firewall CMD. Now, one more thing. Obviously, we have been doing actually we'll do it from here. Systemctl status firewall D. So we see that it's running now. We, in the past, didn't even have it installed. That's not an ideal situation. We could stop the service and then run the status, and we see that it's not running. There's nothing. It's showing that it's there. It is loaded. It's the active, inactive. It's showing it's inactive. If I restart the computer because I enabled it, it would start. But I can also go here and start. So this is a common troubleshooting step, stopping the firewall. Make sure you're in a safe environment if you stop your firewall, and make sure you don't leave it that way. So if you want to say something's not working, is it the firewall? So I stop the firewall and then I go back to this website and say it's still not working on port 8080. So it's not the firewall. I'll restart the firewall and then I will start troubleshooting why 8080 is not working. So you can stop the firewall. Obviously, that is, depending on your environment, that can be a bad thing. So don't do that unless you know exactly why, and be careful about doing that and then leaving it like that. So one other item to be careful about, as I said, we have a runtime configuration, a permanent configuration. You can do that runtime configuration, make everything work, and your server might be up for months or years without that service restarting. And if you restart the service or the server, power outage, hardware failure, whatever reason you need to restart it, you can have your firewall no longer work or no longer allow through things that it was supposed to allow through, and not have any recollection of why. So make sure when you're playing or experimenting or troubleshooting and you open up things on the firewall, if you want them left open, make sure you copy your configuration from the runtime to the permanent configuration. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.